Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Quest for the Bestest. I'm Timo. I'm joined by my usual compatriots as we discuss a new movie this week. We discuss a new movie every week, but we also discuss old movies because that's where most of them are. So we got Tanner, we got Abram, and we got Tucker. And
Yeah,
this time around, we're talking about Out of Africa.
directed by Sydney Pollack, released in
Ah,
1985,
Yep.
starring Meryl Streep and Robert Redford and
and
Michael Kitchen.
Michael Kitchen of all people.
Yep.
Just
So
had a name. That's the only reason we know him.
Yeah.
he's got a good name. We've got some things to discuss, I'm sure, but we should do a little recap last week we talked about Rain Man, and where did Rain Man end up? Well, sorry Raymond, you're at the bottom.
Oh well. Oh
Oh well.
shucks.
Ah
Oh
shucks.
shucks.
But this week we have an entirely new movie from the same decade as Rain Man.
Yes.
We got two Godfathers and now we have two 80s movies. We'll see what we get at the end. Make sure to stick around. We'll be rolling for our next week's Quest for the Best topic. But for today, we'll be talking about Out of Africa. So, someone want to lead us off with
I
their
would love
initial thoughts?
I would love to lead us off because
Oh
one thing that the
yes.
audience will note is that I am not where I usually am. I have been, for various factors, been pushed out to my dorm's common room to record today, which means I can't talk as much, but it's very fortuitous that that happened this week because, frankly, Out of Africa is not a bad movie. In fact, on a technical level, I think it's a very good movie.
Hmm.
But for me, I would prefer a film that's a little bit less polished for in exchange for having some more energy. This
Yeah.
film felt
Energy.
consistently low
We're going to
energy.
talk about energy.
Low energy.
Hmm.
Pretty funny for a coffee-based movie,
Fair,
technically.
good point. Not much caffeine involved here. I
No.
think you can look at this film technically and it's pretty impeccable.
Mhm.
But would
Absolutely.
I sit down and watch this again? No.
Oh.
I don't think I could
No.
dedicate another 2 hours and 40 minutes. I paid attention because I had to. But if I didn't have
Hmm.
to pay attention, I might not have. I watched with my
Yeah.
parents. My dad, he's on his phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, similar story is my dad called me while we were watching the movie. So we talked to him about it. He saw this film in theaters. And he jokingly called it when he was a young strapping chap. He
Hmm.
called it out of $7.50 because that's how much it took him to purchase the ticket for the film.
Shout out to Pathu Hazel.
Pathu, yeah. But yeah, no, I am a kind of person who I like to see the best in things. I like to see what I can take out of anything, and even if it's not exactly for me, I like to recognize what the strengths that does have. And as we were watching this film, I kept consistently being engaged. I didn't know sort of where the story was going, and I wanted to see what was going to happen. But that has its ups and downs. But I was consistently surprised and praising the movie for how, on a technical level, the cinematography, the costume design, the production design, all of that is just absolutely top tier, fantastic.
It's
And
a beautiful
probably,
movie.
yeah, I think that's probably why this won Best Picture. Tanner and I were talking about is the Vista shots and the National Geographic. I think this movie has some of the widest shots in movie history, like genuinely.
It's right up there with your Lawrence of Arabia in the desert, but green. It's green instead of
Yeah,
all
finally.
sand.
Oh, green.
So it's better.
Never before has green been put in a movie more than Out of Africa.
This movie is
No.
very green. I think you're totally spot on. I think the cinematography, I think the costumes, I think the casting is pretty damn good. I really enjoyed. I thought Meryl Streep had really good performance, especially doing an accent. Meryl Streep has her Meryl Streep accent, which shows up every time she plays a character. But I felt like it was a good blend of how she sounds with how like a Danish person speaking English sounds.
I actually found her accent like kind of choppy, like not very convincing at times and distracting at
It
others.
wasn't perfectly consistent.
No.
I'll argue that.
I have a question for the group.
Yeah, speaking of accents.
Speaking of accents, was Robert Redford supposed to be British?
I think he's
And
supposed
if
to be
so,
Danish. His name is Dennis, but it's like Dennis instead of spelled Dennis, and it's got a Y in it in the
it doesn't
credits.
really matter
His
what
name is Dennis
nationality
George
he
Finch
is.
Hatton.
Yeah,
Oh, that's pretty
he's.
British. That's
But in any case, he was just doing an American accent, right?
Doing
He
a
wasn't.
Robert Redford
He
accent.
did not attempt anything.
And also the fact that we looked it up, the real person that he was based on was British.
Hmm.
And that's why we were mostly confused. I don't know. Strange tangent, but it's something we thought
Yes.
about a lot while watching the movie.
Well, it ties into his performance. I thought, well, obviously, Meryl Streep is like the main character. She gets a lot of the, but she gets a lot of the emotional beats, if you want to say that there were any. But Robert Redford, he was a very confusing character for me. Dennis Finch, George Hatton.
Close enough.
Close enough. What did he do? What was his job? What did he do
He's
for
an
a living?
Yeah,
He's
he's
an
an
adventurer.
Well,
He's
you
also-
know what he really was. He's a colonialist. He was doing colonialism
Well, yes,
into
but
Africa.
tying into being a colonialist, I'd say that he was a psychopath because there's a lot of things he says in this movie that just don't make sense, such as he sees a plane flying and says something to the effect of it's a plane that never lands. It lands. We see it land in the movie. What did he mean by that? He plays Mozart for monkeys.
And then get
That's a
surprised
thing.
when the monkeys are like, "What's this?"
And
they
they
Yeah,
mess
fuck
he's
with
with
like, get out of here.
it.
But
Well-
it's so romantic, Robert.
Is it
Well, what's
romantic?
interesting-
So
They're just
dreamy.
fucking with monkeys.
What's interesting with his character is that he serves an opposite purpose to, for instance, what Apollonia served. He really serves Robert Redford to propel Meryl Streep's character. He's
Yeah.
really not that interesting on his own, and I don't even think he adds that much, frankly.
Yeah.
Outside of being
Uh,
this weird, like, controlling presence that, outside of the lion sequence, which, god fucking damn it, I wish it wasn't in slow-mo because that's like the one point of tension or actual.
Oh, it was the one. It
film.
was the one action. There's a fire. There's a raging fire. In one of the
Let's just
scenes,
look at
and
it.
everyone's just kind of standing around looking at it. No
Yeah, in
one's
the-
surprised. No one's trying to put it out. No one is doing anything of substance or action. They're just standing around.
What's also is interesting with the line sequence, though, to bring it back to Robert Redford, is that the only time we see him really come alive to any extent. A lot of his action, he takes a lot of his actions off screen, which I think is part of why his character is interesting as viewed through the lens of Meryl Streep. But I wish we actually saw more of him doing cool stuff, because
Mhm.
he's made out to be a very cool guy. But it was a real instance of, well, we're trying to relate to Meryl Streep, so don't see him be cool. But as an audience member, that's not too engaging.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the MO of this whole movie is not very engaging.
This movie's kind of boring.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's boring.
Very. I would say.
And here's the thing. I started off this discussion by me saying that it was hard for me to tell where the story was going. And that was both pretty interesting because I kept on my toes and I didn't know what was coming next. But I also think that that's to the movie's detriment. Not knowing where the story is going meant anything could happen. And usually nothing happened, or just something random happened, or a time jump happened. And it was that lack of direction that the movie had in terms of its flow and its pacing that was really what, especially near the end, just made me completely lose interest, because I was like, okay, if anything can happen, and none of these characters could not see each other for like up to 2 years. Like, there's so many time jumps and they don't interact very much, and characters just dip and then come back, and like, I don't know. It made it hard for me to understand what was going on, where all the characters were, and what exactly I was supposed to be connecting to, other than Meryl Streep's character, Tana. It's one letter away from Tanner, but
Or
her name
my
is also
name.
Karen.
Her
I don't
name's
know.
Karen.
Yeah, but I aside from just connecting to her being a woman in colonialist Kenya, which I think could have been a much cooler story if it was given a lot of twists, because that core it could be interesting, but I don't think that this was the right way to present that kind of story.
Well, it's also important to note that this film is largely a period piece, if anything. It reminded me a lot of early American literature I read last year for college.
Oh.
It's a lot about synthesizing location and the undercurrent, the social undercurrents, the political undercurrents. Clearly, this movie strikes at an audience, which is why it won Best Picture. But am I in the audience that really wants to sit down and, through subtle actions and various things, understand the dynamic between these characters in the context of colonializing Kenya? Not really. I think that a lot of our critiques are going to hit the fact that we're not the audience for this film.
Yeah.
We are obviously not.
Yeah. Yeah, well, touching on the whole colonialism and social and political aspects, and we don't have to talk about this ad nauseum, but there were points in this where I just felt a little it was made in 1985, which in context isn't that long ago, but socially and where movies have gone socially a long time ago, the African people weren't characters in this movie. They didn't have
Yeah.
personality or any real push in the film. Yeah, and there was points where they were used as props, and it felt very gross. There was a specific time when Meryl Streep, the boy that she has as the cook, she hires as the cook, she was just a dick to him for no reason, and then
Yeah.
that never comes back.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that. That part made me feel weird because I was like, it felt very out of place because
She
she had been
like,
shown being like compassionate and like trying to maybe
and she
do the right
was
thing.
okay to him after that.
Mhm.
But for whatever reason, in that specific scene, she was just very rude to him. I guess because her fancy friend was there.
But that wasn't consistent with they had shown up other times. I mean,
Yeah.
that's weird. And that scene in particular was something that we had a conversation about. Is because when that happened, I sort of thought that the movie was going to take a turn. I thought it was going to turn into her using the white privilege, white savior sort of story going to her head and like saying like, oh, these are my people. I'm teaching them. I'm making them to be, real people, even though they're just living their own culture. And I thought it was going to delve into that, but it kind of just touched on that for a second and then
But considering, if we can look at it both from the context of today's, socio-political lens and from the lens of the 1985, and just to touch on it for then, I think is important that the film doesn't just like completely bulldoze over all of these subtleties and nuances about colonialism and about like the chief is like he doesn't want his kids to read, and the her advisor basically the African
translator.
guy, the
Yeah.
translator, yeah, is like, well, they already have stories. They don't, they're not written. Like
Yeah, the
they already,
culture clash was something that this movie did focus on. I wish I'd focused on it more because I found that to be pretty
it
interesting.
was, yeah.
Yeah, and those moments where she was interacting with the Kikuya and that whole side of the story, I thought was pretty interesting.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that takes a back seat to a bunch of European people dicking around in Africa
Yeah.
and figuring out their businesses and having like weird government problems and like tea parties. And
Yes.
not
There's a-
that's
there's a
not
lot of-
my jam.
This
There's a
movie-
war in this movie. This movie's kind of a war movie.
This
Yeah.
movie has
Does it?
World
Does
War
that
One.
war? Does the war
This-
matter?
This movie has World War One, the character fighting a deadly illness, and a lion attack, none of which are paid any attention to, and
In the plot, they don't matter that much
just
in
get
the plot.
mulled over. We skip the one point where Meryl Streep could like have deep introspective moments where like I could die, I have syphilis, I could die. We time jump that.
Time jump completely.
Yeah.
Just montage over that with some fun African vistas and animals
Yeah.
roaming around. Abram, looks like you want to say something.
I mean, I just don't necessarily. I just think that what the film is trying to accomplish inherently is not what I want out of a film.
Yeah.
It's really that simple because the story is not about her getting syphilis. It's not about the lion attack, and the war is just contextual, really,
Yeah.
for why her first husband is gone, and to add some interesting nuances to the character of Robert Redford, who pushes back against the conflict. All of these things are intentionally backgrounded to this more interpersonal story. I think it's a story far more about gender roles and far more about Meryl Streep's character being subversive in various ways, taking agency back. And I just don't know how compelling that still is. And I think what we're going to find when we watch a lot of Best Pictures is that we're just going to attack them through a lens that is just incongruous with what they're trying to accomplish. And
Mhm.
we're going to find a lot of these films to just not hit.
Yep.
So I think it's important that we circle back to the fact that this is obviously deserving of Best Picture. I felt watching, I absolutely understood the merit to this film, but contextualize that against the fact that I'm not looking for the narrative they're telling. I'm not engaged by this moment that they're trying to show us.
I don't know. I don't know if I can say this is deserving of Best Picture. As we get to maybe a recurring segment of this show, I'll list off movies that probably should have won Best Picture over this if the Academy wasn't so focused on American and white people cinema. Because there's a few good foreign films that came out this year, but yeah, is it deserving of Best Picture considering how dull this romance is? Is it a well-written romance? I don't think it is.
No,
It
because
should
Robert
it
Redford's character only becomes really that important in like the last third of the film.
But
it's
Robert Redford's character is also being used by Meryl Streep. I think what's interesting about the dynamic is it's atypical. This isn't
Yeah.
a typical romance dynamic.
It's also
And
not like you can talk about like the level of romance by like a fiery candle. Like this one is not it's not a super bright, like high intensity candle. It's low intensity. And yet it's
okay.
still there. And I think it still matters. Even
like
if it isn't so like passionate, outwardly.
like the
Hmm.
sequence when Robert Redford is planning his next plane adventure. Shout out to him just learning how to fly at some point, which I don't view as a problem with the film. It's just a weird left hand turn to take. But when he's planning, he's going to go with this other woman just as a friend, and Meryl Streep can't handle that. That's an interesting inversion of gender roles, and that's an interesting sequence in the film that I think underpins the way that she, in a lot of ways, is using him and was using her husband, and has always been using different characters. And through that lens, I think it's a much more nuanced and interesting story than we might be giving it credit for.
Yeah. So two things. First off, to reference your perspective change on how this movie does accomplish what it was trying for, we're just not the audience. I do think that this is important to consider. I do, however, want to just put that out there as a baseline and not necessarily have to bring it up in a review because, again, that is true, but this is our reviews. And if we're going to talk about our opinions on it, I don't want it to have to be a caveat every single time. I feel like that kind of takes a knock out of our own criticisms. We are a different audience, but we are the ones reviewing this movie. So I think
Yeah.
that leaving it at that is better. But also referencing that scene where he talks about Felicity, the sort of extra character that he was going to go off with. That's one of my biggest problems with this movie is how it balances its side characters. Really, Meryl Streep, Robert Redford, and her husband Bror are kind of the only ones that get a reasonable amount of screen time. There's a couple other ones, but other than that, as I said, characters just pop in and out. Characters come back after years of not seeing each other, and it's that way that it kind of just feels disconnected from everything that made it hard for me to connect to any of the characters. Felicity shows up at the beginning. Okay, she's going to be an important character. No, she comes back 3 times, maybe for very short cameos. And it's that feeling of the characters not really having weight to them because they could be there, they could not, they could never show up again. Who knows? Like, I don't know. It was very frustrating to me. And that's one of my biggest problems with this movie and the way I connected to it.
I'd have to agree.
Other topics?
Yeah. Did we? I mean, we've shouted out. We've given a shout out to the cinematography. Obviously, a very
Yeah.
beautiful shots. Beautiful, as Tucker pointed out, some great silhouette shots. Especially like
Yeah.
I remember one where Robert Redford's on the Serengeti and there's elephants or giraffes, I believe, something that's also silhouetted against him.
And a tree that's silhouetted and the
and a
sunset
tree.
in the background. I'm like, oh yeah.
Just the whole sequence of them flying in the plane, good sequence, very awesome, very great shots, very wide. I like those a lot. I think the production design also, I assume they had to build at least some of the villages and the farm sets.
I think
So
this actually
those are very well
was
designed.
shot in Kenya. I think
Oh,
they
yeah.
actually shot it there, which
I totally believe that.
I
Yeah.
think that's a plus for the film. You got to talk about exoticism in movies and like how movies have, well, this movie obviously is white people gallivanting around in a place where it's not really their place.
Yes.
But despite that, it still has the bit where it tries for being accurate in as much as it can, even when you're talking about history that is conflicted and kind of yikes.
Yeah.
Kind of yikes.
Kind of yikes. I think I just kind of I think I had something else just to rip on Robert Redford's character a bit more because he perturbed me a lot in this movie. Yeah, because he's like this very like, oh, I'm so connected to the world. It's ethereal, and he says something along the lines of, oh, this land doesn't belong to us. We're just passing through. And then cut to earlier in the film, he's like, here, help me load up this ivory.
Yeah, it's pretty inconsistent. I don't know.
Well, then, I think we've exhausted our talking points, our thoughts about the movie. And And so becomes the moment where we must decide
Oh
where to
yes.
place it on the list. So should we start at the bottom or should we start at the top?
I think let's start at the bottom.
I think we
Okay.
should just save time.
Okay, raise your hand if you think it should go above number 4, Rain Man.
Oh shit. Okay. Well,
Well,
that is one Timo's vote for it going above Rain Man.
do you want to give yourself a little bit of a soapbox to stand on?
Sure, yeah. I actually think that this movie is less painful to watch than Rain Man, and it
Hmm.
feels more genuine. Even though it's kind of it's slow and disconnected from the plot, and it's a little bit boring. I think it's better shot. It's more beautiful. It's more interesting. I'm much more interested in what happens in this movie than I am
Hmm.
in Rain Man. Just you know, these movies both deal with difficult topics, and it's hard to make a movie about something as nuanced as mental, like as autism and as colonialism. But I feel like it just doesn't. This movie just feels a little bit better to me than Rain Man did. They're very close, I think, but just
Okay.
a couple technical bits. This movie is far more beautiful. It's a period piece that's more difficult to do as a film, and the story is. I think it is layered. I think it is. I think it's deeper than we maybe have given it credit for. Just it's especially from my male perspective. This movie is not told through like male eyes. It's told through a woman, and so I, as a viewer, have to work extra hard to really get to that level of understanding of what the story and the plot is about. And maybe I haven't quite put in that much effort so far into like really delving in and fully getting what it is. Now, I don't know if I want to rewatch it, but
Yeah. If yeah, the what I can say is that I would absolutely much rather rewatch Rain Man again than rewatch this. While my comments from last week about Rain Man still stand to my thoughts on that movie, I think the story beats are very repetitive. At least they're interesting story beats in Rain Man as opposed to this film.
Yeah. I think, and I am going to put this out there just as why I didn't connect to this movie, why I still respect it. It's a well known fact that I'm not a long movie fan, especially not long movies where it's more empty. Not a 2001 fan, not a Lawrence of Arabia fan. And this one was
he
kind
just
of one.
he just goes and calls out my 2 favorite movies.
I know. We've had this conversation many a time.
Well,
but
you watch. I'm going to channel my energy, and we're going to watch Lawrence of Arabia next week.
Oh
shit.
God! If that
God.
happens, you better have that. You better have that clip of the spinner going.
Yeah.
Not
I don't know what number it is. Okay.
I know. But I think that about does it. Abram, you got anything else to say?
Yeah, I do. I think Timo hit the nail on the head. I think this film has a lot more, it's operating on a lot more levels than we gave it credit for. But to your point, Tucker, we're examining this film through our lens. And while I think it is more important personally to contextualize what we bring into the film and how that is different from what the film is trying to achieve, I don't think that we can undercut what it does and what it tries to do. Even though, for me personally, I found it to be a bit of a drag. It doesn't change any of the things that Timo said, but I would absolutely watch Rain Man over this.
I'd like to shout out Abram Buhner, who sent a Snapchat of the film that said "out of patience."
Nice.
Or like "out of patience." So that was pretty funny.
Okay.
But I think it's that time.
Oh well, hang on.
Oh,
I want to do my
Segment?
quick.
Yeah.
Just a few films that didn't get nominated.
Those are my favorite film years ever.
Yeah. Just
3 of my top
films.
25 favorite films of all time came out in this year.
Okay, here we go. So a few films that didn't even get nominated for Best Picture. Well, obviously not Best Picture bait, but Back to the Future. We also have films like Brazil, one of Tucker's favorites. A film that I absolutely think should have gotten some award, at least some Best Picture something. Come and See. It's a Russian film.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Great movie. Great movie. We also have Akira Kurosawa's Ran.
Oh,
Ron.
Ron, excuse me. It looks like Ran. I'm sorry.
The title's not in English.
I'm sorry. What else do we got? Oh, and of course, how could we forget Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Pee-wee's
And Purple Rose of Cairo. That's
and
the
Purple
third
Rose
one.
of Cairo.
I
yes.
love that movie. Okay, well, no, yeah, I mean, very good year for films. This would not have even been on anywhere near my short list of top films that year. But I mean, hey, the Academy clearly disagreed. It's that time though.
It's that time.
This is
Okay.
genuinely my favorite moment of the week because
The
it
best-
combines
the
my
best
list
30
making.
seconds of your week are about to happen. Okay. I've got it pulled up. Are you ready? I'm going to click
Oh, you know I am, baby.
the spin wheel. Oh,
Out of AV7 movies,
out of
we are
87
watching
Oh,
next
it's going.
week.
And we landed on the number 44.
Ooh,
44.
okay, all right. I'm not sure.
I don't know if that's a newer or an older one. I don't know how the list is.
No, this is sort of in the
ordered.
middle because there are 87, so that's
Oh, yeah,
pretty much
that's true.
exactly in the middle.
But it should be
Another
older.
70s movie. Yeah,
Oh,
Number 70.
older is for us
yes.
very.
Well, I
very
meant when I said
comparative.
older, I meant like 20s or 30s.
I know what film it is.
Oh, would
It
you
is
tell us?
1971, directed by William Friedkin, director of
Oh.
The Exorcist,
Oh.
starring Gene Hackman. The French Connection.
The
Oh.
French Connection. I think I've seen this
Good.
one already. This is a good movie. This is a good movie.
I've never heard
I'm
of
very
this movie.
excited.
I'm excited.
This is another crime movie, I think.
Fantastic. Can
Uh-oh.
we shout out quickly The French Dispatch?
Yes, that movie that has not been released yet.
God, I can't wait
I'm
to see
excited
that.
for it.
French Dispatch.
Okay, well, I think we're about done here.
Well, we
honestly, this was
forgot-
a much better conversation than
Oh,
I thought it was.
what did we
gonna be.
forget?
We
We
forgot.
forgot to look at our graph.
Oh,
Oh,
the
yeah.
graphic.
Okay, are
This
you ready?
looks great.
Whoa!
Wow, look at the glit. We have 5 on there now.
We have
It's the top
5.
5.
Top 5 best movies of
Ooh.
all time.
It's true. Look at it. Read them and weep.
But where's Blade Runner? I don't think that's accurate.
Hmm.
Well,
What year was Blade Runner? What
1982.
82. I don't think
what's-
it was nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah, I
No,
was gonna
it's
say
not.
what won Best Picture over Blade Runner. We'll find out when we get to that year eventually in the next
Yep.
2 years.
And I
Well-
won't shut up about it when we get there.
Yeah, me neither. So
Fucking
next
guys.
week we'll be back for another episode of The Quest for the Bestest. We're going to be looking at The French Connection by William Friedkin from what, 71?
Yep.
1971.
I'm excited. I think we're going to get up there. We're going to put some old movies down the list a couple notches.
Oh, hopefully.
Oh wow. Okay. All
I
right.
actually just really want to watch this. So luckily I
Yeah.
think we're going to
Has anyone seen it here?
I think
No.
I have. I think I've seen it once. A long
Okay.
time.
I'm
ago.
I
Years
like
and
some-
years
That's
ago.
like 0.33 of us have watched it.
Hmm. I'm a Friedkin stan. I like some Friedkin.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, guys.
Yes, thank you for sticking around. We'll be back
Goodbye.
next week.
So
I'd
long.
like to tag it. We're going to tell you we'll be back next week, but we have no fucking idea what's going to happen next 7 days. For all
Sure.
you know, this might be
Who's
the
gonna
last
watch the
episode of
movie?
show. This
I
might be the
am.
last episode of the show.
I'm gonna watch the freaking movie.
Timo's gonna watch the movie this time.
We might see you in a week.
Yeah,
Well,
I hope we don't upset Gandhi with our review of Gandhi.
Richard Attenborough directed Gandhi.
Yeah, he did. He also directed fucking Chaplin with Robert Downey Jr.
What? What?